The airport loudspeaker blared harshly. The crowd buzzing with anticipation for boarding suddenly went silent, as if someone had pressed a button to mute the whole world. At the entrance to first class, Marcus Hayes, the gaunt gate manager with a red tie choking his neck, thrust out an arm, blocking 17-year-old twin brothers Jordan and Jaden Carter. His words sliced the air like knives. "I don't care who your father is. Two black boys like you will never step into first class." Laughter erupted behind them. Jaden's head dropped, his shoulders trembling. But Jordan lifted his chin, eyes glinting cold, lips curving into a razor-thin smile. "Your only mistake was thinking my father wouldn't find out about this." The atmosphere froze. Phone cameras lit up. A storm had just begun. Denver International Airport, the largest airport in the American West, buzzed like a steel and glass beehive that morning. Sunlight streamed through the soaring roof, spilling down on thousands of hurried footsteps. Travelers carried sleek suitcases, company-stamped laptops, tailored blazers, everything radiating an invisible order where power was measured in platinum miles. Amid that order walked two 17-year-olds, bound together by blood but shaped differently by the world. Jordan Carter, tall, shoulders squared, eyes dark with discipline. He rose at 5, ran before school, devoured books on philosophy and economics like a man already preparing for the weight of leadership. His mindset was granite. No noise, no flash, only unshakable endurance. Beside him, his twin Jaden was the mirror opposite. Gentle smile, eyes quick to glisten, gifted in music and tech. He dreamed of MIT's labs that cracked open the future, yet feared the world would never see his mind first, only his skin. They were sons of David Carter, CEO of Atlas Airlines, a towering figure in American aviation. But this morning, there were no uniforms, no bodyguards, no hints of legacy. Just two teenagers in jeans with backpacks and passports headed for a first-class flight to Boston. An ordinary journey until the world's gaze turned sharp. At check-in, Kyle Benson, a slick-haired attendant, glanced at Jordan's first-class ticket and smirked. "First class? What, your folks hit the janitor's jackpot lottery?" The words cracked like a slap in the gleaming hall. A few passengers turned, others smirked. Jaden flushed, shrinking back. Jordan's knuckles whitened around his passport, but his frame stayed straight. Kyle tapped at the keyboard, then flicked his wrist. "Looks like a mix-up. Economy for you boys. First class isn't made for you." He cast a glance at the line of executives behind them, as if to say, "See, this is how the order holds." Jordan inhaled, long and slow. He knew one flash of anger, one slammed fist, and every camera would spin the story. CEO's sons cause airport disturbance. That wasn't strategy. He placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder and murmured, "Steady. Not here. We handle it at the gate." They pulled their bags away, leaving Kyle to his smug grin. Eyes followed, some satisfied, some pitying. Injustice was no stranger. It was the recurring crack in the American dream, a promise of fairness built on invisible walls. At security, the pattern deepened. "Random check, step aside," barked TSA agent Tracy Miller. She tore through Jaden's bag, tossing a vitamin bottle across the floor. "What's this, a barbershop on board?" She jeered at his hair kit. Laughter rippled. Jaden bent to gather his things, hands shaking. A phone rose to record, but Tracy snapped, "One more video, and you're detained." The air choked tight. "Surrender. It was a vow. We will not kneel forever." The cruelest cut came when Linda Harris, the only black supervisor on duty, approached. Relief flickered in Jaden's face, until she said flatly, "If you want to grow in this world, you better be twice as good. Don't expect the system to bend for you." The words doused hope colder than any jeer. Jordan felt something splinter inside. Even those who'd walked the same gauntlet of prejudice could still choose the side of the gatekeepers. At gate C-27, the final wall stood waiting. Marcus Hayes, the gate manager whose name the nation would soon know, blocked their path. His voice clanged like iron. Last chance, economy or nothing. Dozens of eyes locked on them, some amused, some hungry for spectacle. Jordan squeezed Jaden's shoulder and stepped forward. No plea, no scene. He slid the ticket across, let Marcus reprint the downgrade, and walked through. Silent, burning. Jaden's whisper cut sharp. Why take this humiliation? Jordan's eyes stayed fixed ahead. Because discipline isn't always striking back. Discipline is knowing when to stay silent, so that when we fight, we don't just win a round, we win the war. No one in that terminal knew it yet, but a fuse had been lit. Hidden phone cameras had already captured it all. And on the far side of the runway, David Carter's phone buzzed with the first alert of what was happening to his sons. The question lingered in the air. Would Jordan and Jaden remain boys forced into coach, or would they rise to prove that the American dream was more than a slogan? The waiting area felt suffocating, as if locked inside a glass box. The loudspeakers droned on. Passengers filed through the boarding gate. Yet every step Jordan and Jaden took felt like sinking deeper into ice. They had accepted economy tickets, but the humiliation didn't end there. The world seemed determined to test the patience of two 17-year-old boys. At the final checkpoint, a sharp female voice cut through.
Tracy Miller, a TSA officer with eyes wired full of bias, pointed directly at Jaden. She ripped open his small backpack, tossing items to the floor like garbage. A bottle of vitamins rolled under the lights. A travel shampoo cracked open, spilling across the tiles. The crowd held its breath. Some raised phones to record, but when Tracy snapped that anyone filming would be detained, silence fell heavy. Only the sound of belongings being scattered and Jaden's ragged breathing remained.
Jordan stood still. He knelt, calmly gathering each item, wiping the bottle clean with his shirt, placing it back inside the bag. His face betrayed nothing, but in his eyes burned a frightening steadiness. Jaden kept his head bowed, swallowed by fear. Jordan laid a hand on his shoulder, a silent promise. There was still a road ahead. On their way to the gate, they crossed paths with Linda Harris, the graying supervisor, the only black manager in the group. For a flicker of a moment, Jaden hoped she might speak a word of comfort. Instead, her gaze was ice, her voice tolling like a funeral bell. If they wanted to survive, to grow a career, she said, they would have to be twice as good. Stay quiet, endure. Don't expect the system to change for the young. Her words cut deeper than mockery. Jordan froze, realizing betrayal didn't only come from enemies, but also from those who should have stood with them. At the boarding door, Marcus Hayes loomed, his shadow a dark slash across the gleaming floor. He declared loudly, without lowering his voice, that they had two choices, economy or nowhere. The air sagged heavy. Passengers halted, watching like an audience at a cruel play. Jordan said nothing, pleaded nothing. He handed over the ticket, let Marcus stamp the downgrade, and walked through the mist of disdain. In that silence, Marcus caught the faintest smile at the corner of Jordan's mouth. Thin, cutting, unsettling. It wasn't defeat. It was a warning. They sank into cramped economy seats, surrounded by plastic, crying children, an air that felt too tight to breathe. Jaden's eyes glistened. We can't let this go, Jordan. They made us a joke. Jordan pressed his palm against the seat back ahead, exhaling slow as if counting each breath. One day you'll understand. Silence is strategy. Holding back isn't surrender. It's preparation for a fight that wins more than just a round. The last passengers boarded. Despair. He thought of their father. David Carter, CEO of Atlas Airlines, face on the cover of Forbes, voice like steel. With shaking hands, he pulled out his phone. We have to call Dad. Jordan hesitated, then nodded. Do it. The screen lit up, the familiar name glowing. When their father's voice broke through, deep and cold, it pulled them from the edge. Jaden recounted it all, the insults, the sneers, the stripping of dignity. Silence hung. Then David Carter spoke, every word like thunder. "Record everything. Let them see who really owns the skies." The switch flipped. The cabin's air shifted. Jordan raised the phone, filming each row, each sneer, each smirk. Jaden followed, capturing the raw ledger of injustice they had been forced to swallow. Outside on the runway, emergency signals began to pulse. David Carter wasn't just a CEO. He was the man holding the strings of one of America's largest airlines. When he triggered Emergency Protocol Alpha, dominoes cascaded. More than 300 flights were rerouted. Alerts blared through systems. Leaks ignited social media. News anchors cut into broadcasts with a single headline in red: Atlas Airlines CEO disrupts air travel to defend his sons? In the economy cabin, Jordan met his brother's eyes. This is only the beginning. They thought we'd endure forever, but this time they picked the wrong family. Jaden nodded, though fear still gnawed. Could even their father stand against an entire system? As the door sealed and the plane rolled, a flicker of hope arrived. Elena Morales, a flight attendant with kind eyes, slipped past and pressed a note into Jordan's hand. Her handwriting shook, but the words burned clear: "I will testify." Jordan clenched it like a spark in the dark. Across town in Atlas Airlines' boardroom, Victor Langston, the second most powerful shareholder, went live. His face was grave, his tone biting. "David Carter cost us millions, disrupted an industry, all to cover for two boys. Proof of his incompetence and abuse of power." His words lit up the internet, fueling a storm, but the true storm hadn't broken yet. Jordan and Jaden knew. The spotlight was no longer on Atlas Airlines, but on them. Not as humiliated teens, but as the matchstick to a fire the nation had never seen. The plane door locked, the wheels rolled, but the atmosphere pressed tight, bracing for an explosion fiercer than any thundercloud outside the window. The plane vibrated softly as the engines roared for takeoff. But the real storm wasn't outside the windows. It lived in every glance, in every camera just switched on, in the heavy breaths of those who had just witnessed truth breaking through. Jordan sat upright, phone in hand, recording the chain of humiliation from check-in to the forced downgrade into economy. Beside him, Jaden leaned back, hands trembling, but his eyes now burned with resolve after hearing their father's voice. In New York, David Carter sat in Atlas Airlines' highest control room. Before him, massive screens glowed with the nation's airspace, dots of light crisscrossing like a giant web. When he ordered Emergency Protocol Alpha, the board lit crimson. Flights grounded, pilots forced to circle back. Hundreds of departures froze in place. News broke instantly, and Victor Langston, the powerful shareholder, pounced. Seated in a broadcast studio, wrapped in a dark tailored suit, Victor struck hard, accusing Carter of putting family above millions of passengers, turning a global airline into his personal playground, branding him a dictator unfit to lead. Millions watched, outrage swelling like a tide. But in cramped economy, Jordan kept feeding proof to his father. Footage of Marcus Hayes barring their entry, Kyle Benson's mockery, Tracy scattering Jaden's belongings across the floor. No longer stories, now evidence. And then came the note. Elena Morales' handwriting trembled but was clear. She had witnessed it. She would testify. Jordan lifted it to his lens. The truth cannot be buried. If anyone doubts it, listen to our witness. The internet erupted. Jordan's clip spread at light speed. #AtlasTruth topping every feed. News networks replayed his videos on loop. America split in two. Half convinced Carter had abused power, the other half beginning to see the cracks of a deeper system long ignored. In headquarters, David Carter folded his arms, eyes steady. The choice was clear: fall or flip the board. At 11 p.m., he forced a live stream with the full board of directors, broadcast to the world. Cameras blinked alive. Carter appeared in a black suit, face calm, unreadable. Opposite him sat Victor Langston, bold from his earlier TV assault. He launched fresh attacks, railing about millions lost, chaos unleashed. Carter stayed silent until the screen shifted. Up came the footage, Marcus sneering, Kyle jeering, Tracy's threats. Silence crashed over the boardroom. Composed executives flushed red, averting eyes. David's voice cut, slow and precise. An airline is built on trust. Trust that when you buy a ticket, you will be treated fairly, like anyone else. If this company cannot protect dignity, it does not deserve to exist. Victor sputtered, claiming the videos were doctored, that it was all misunderstanding. But then Elena Morales appeared in the live stream. Voice shaking, she confirmed every detail. What you saw is real, and it's not. The first time. Complaints have been buried, reports never reached this board. Her words gutted Victor's last defense. His protests grew frantic, revealing panic. Murmurs spread among directors. Phones lit with headlines as public opinion turned. If the CEO's own son suffered such treatment, what chance did ordinary passengers have? Carter struck the final blow. He revealed files of suppressed complaints bearing signatures from Marcus, Kyle, Tracy, even Linda Harris. Proof of a pattern. And then, on live camera, he signed immediate suspensions. Social media exploded. The image of David Carter, pen in hand, became iconic. His closing words thundered across every platform. An airline that cannot protect its passengers' dignity does not deserve to exist. Back in economy, Jordan refreshed the stream. He and Jaden stared, eyes shining. Jaden whispered, almost in disbelief, "Dad just shook the skies. For us." Jordan clasped his brother's hand, a surge of faith rising in him. Never again would anyone dismiss them as kids in the wrong seats. But storms don't end cleanly. Outside, America's voices split into millions. Atlas Airlines stood on the edge of history. Truth was out. But would justice endure or fade as a passing spectacle? And what price would the Carter family pay for igniting a war above the clouds? That night, New York refused to sleep. The Atlas Airlines tower blazed like a fortress of glass, while in Times Square, giant LED screens replayed every frame of the live stream. Victor Langston's twisted face as he was accused, his trembling hands scrambling to hide the truth, now replayed as comedy for a restless nation. Just hours after David Carter signed the suspensions, Atlas stock began to plummet, not from passenger panic, but from investors fleeing the sinking side of the boardroom war. On television, analysts called it systemic collapse. What surfaced wasn't just a handful of discriminatory incidents, but a web of cover-ups. Marcus Hayes, Kyle Benson, Tracy Miller, and Linda Harris had signed off on dozens of passenger complaints that vanished into drawers. Those files now lay bare, dissected by reporters, each signature a nail in their defense. In his luxury apartment, Victor sat frozen before the glow of the screen, his face drained of color. Call after call went unanswered. Partners cut ties, lawyers shook their heads, even old allies erased him from their phones. His last shouted threat, "I'll sue! I'll destroy him!" echoed hollow against the empty walls. On the other side, David Carter's voice struck like a verdict. His empire was already rotting. Today, the world simply saw it. In the days that followed, a public trial unfolded online. Passengers stepped forward. A middle-aged woman recalled being forced into economy despite her business ticket. A black student described being interrogated over his luggage in front of friends. A former employee revealed reports that had been buried on command. Each testimony swung like a hammer at walls already cracked. Linda Harris, who once told the Carter boys not to expect the system to change, became the symbol of betrayal. When reporters found her, there was no steely glare left, only weariness and regret. She confessed through tears that fear of losing her job, fear of not feeding her family, had led her to silence. And then silence became habit. But the public had no sympathy left. To them, she was the face of a generation that compromised too long, letting injustice harden into normal. Marcus Hayes was suspended at once, his swagger gone as cameras caught him ducking behind doors. Kyle Benson was fired overnight, his social media flooded with the outrage of passengers he had once sneered at. Tracy Miller was placed under federal investigation, her threat to passengers caught on video and broadcast nationwide as the face of abuse of power. Public opinion swung like a tide. Jordan and Jaden became unexpected icons, not because they shouted or rebelled, but because their silence and discipline had cracked a giant. Talk shows, op-eds, think pieces painted them as proved sons, put to steady an industry in chaos. At a press conference, he named no villains. Instead, he spoke of principle. We do not seek revenge. We only bring truth into the light. And when light shines, darkness dissolves on its own. That single line spread across every platform, shared millions of times. In a season of fury, Carter's refusal to gloat became his sharpest weapon. Calmness, not vengeance, gave him power. Then came the allies. Long silent employees wrote an open letter apologizing for their silence. Some investors pledged fresh funding to rebuild Atlas, signaling their support for Carter's leadership. Public trust, once brittle, began to mend. Victor Langston, in a final gasp, hired lawyers to sue, crying entrapment. But leaks of his secret financials struck harder. A slush fund, bribes, deals with officials. Each revelation hacked at his legacy until nothing remained. From a titan, he became an outcast. To the public, these days felt like a grand trial of an entire system, and at its center stood David Carter, not as judge, but as a father defending his sons, a leader restoring trust. Photos of Jordan and Jaden surfaced, walking hand in hand through city streets, not with arrogance, but quiet composure. That quietness, more than any speech, transformed them into symbols of the American dream, proven not in slogans, but in the courage to stand and the discipline to endure. At dawn, as light spilled across the runways, Atlas planes lifted once again. But now, passengers didn't just see an airline. They saw a story that had shaken a nation awake. Truth was no longer buried. Justice was in motion. And ahead, the promise of rebirth waited. The first morning after the earthquake, Atlas Airlines headquarters opened its doors as usual. But inside, the air had changed to its core. Employees no longer shuffled past security with lowered eyes. They greeted one another with something new in their gaze. The glossy posters that once lined the halls were replaced with drafts of a Passenger Bill of Rights, a declaration unveiled overnight. Short, firm, uncompromising, it affirmed the inviolable dignity and equal treatment of every passenger. Printed by the thousands, it now sat in every seat back pocket on every flight leaving that morning. In Washington, David Carter stepped to the podium not just as CEO, but as a reformer. He outlined restructuring plans, new oversight procedures, an independent monitoring body, and a direct channel for complaints to reach the board itself. The press scribbled every detail, and for the first time since chaos broke, Wall Street steadied. Investors began to realize Atlas was not collapsing, it was transforming. Jordan and Jaden, once barred from boarding, now sat as honored guests at the National Youth Conference on Mindset and Mental Health. Under bright stage lights, their young but battle-tested faces carried the weight of lived truth. Jaden spoke first, voice no longer trembling as he recalled being searched and silenced. That moment, he said, taught him the power of emotional control, of holding discipline when the world tried to break it. Jordan followed, eyes blazing. Discipline isn't just study or work. It's knowing when to stay quiet and when to speak. If you can stay clear-headed at the hardest moment, you can turn failure into the fuel for your own growth. The hall thundered with applause. Psychologists, educators, and hundreds of students listened with awe. The twins weren't lecturing. They were simply telling their story, raw and unvarnished. And that honesty carried straight into hearts. Meanwhile, Atlas restarted flights under a new service system. Each plane carried an independent passenger advocate. Training in stress management and leadership extended to everyone, from executives to flight attendants to gate staff. The media called it a cultural revolution in aviation. David Carter only said, "This is what should have been done long ago." One golden afternoon in Denver, Jordan and Jaden boarded another flight. No stares, no sneers, just passengers. In first class, a black girl of 7 clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide as she settled into the broad leather seat. She looked around, face glowing as though she'd entered a fairy tale. Jaden leaned to his brother. "She'll never go through what we did." Jordan only smiled, the weight finally lifting, sky opening ahead. News hailed David Carter as a leader who faced the storm. But in private, he told his sons the real lesson: not winning a media war, but preserving trust, rekindling faith in the American dream. Success, he reminded, was never an endpoint. It was proof, step by step, that the right path endures. In a final twist, Victor Langston reappeared before cameras. No suit, just a wrinkled shirt. His voice cracked as he admitted failure, apologizing for greed and power blinding his judgment. Some dismissed it as strategy. Others believed ruin had forced truth out of him. Either way, it closed one chapter of justice, opening another. The shockwaves spread. Rival airlines rolled out their own reforms, pledging to respect passenger dignity. The press dubbed it the Atlas Effect, proof that one event, if powerful enough, could drag an entire industry toward change. In a Boston hotel room, Jordan opened an email, Harvard acceptance. At the same moment, Jaden read his own, MIT. The twins stared, then burst into laughter, releasing all the weight of the past months. They were no longer boys mocked at a boarding gate, but young men who would walk through fire with discipline and faith intact. A plane surged down the runway, rising into the sunset sky. Through the window, golden light bathed the clouds, reflected on their faces. Jaden whispered, voice like wind, "Success isn't the destination, it's proving them wrong every step of the way." Jordan tilted his head toward the horizon, eyes alight with what lay ahead. On the final screen, words appeared over the blazing sky, "Success isn't a destination, it's proving them wrong every step of the way." And the narrator's voice carried steady and sure. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. More underdog stories are on their way.